Big thank you. Merci beaucoup for the welcome here in this amazing campaign office. I want to give a big shout out to our candidates from Sudbury, Nadia, and from Nickel Belt, Andrienne. We're so. On est tellement fiers d'avoir des candidates assez extraordinaires comme Andrienne et Nadia. C'est tellement grand honneur pour notre mouvement. I also want to acknowledge that we are here on the Robinson-Huron Treaty Territories, and it's always part of our tradition to fight for justice for the First People of this land. Aujourd'hui, on va parler de le coût de voter pour une autre carte de M. Trudeau. Le coût, c'est ici, derrière moi. Le coût, c'est le bureau parlementaire du budget. Ils ont fait une analyse et ils ont analysé que chaque an, 25 milliards de dollars sont perdus parce que M. Trudeau, au niveau fédéral, ne fait pas le travail de mettre fin aux échappatoires et perquis fiscaux. Et à cause de ça, on perd 25 milliards de dollars chaque année. Ça veut dire, après 6 ans, c'est presque 150 milliards de dollars. Donc, c'est beaucoup. Et avec cet argent, on aurait pu investir pour bâtir des hôpitaux, des hôpitaux, d'embaucher des infirmières et des infirmiers. On aurait pu investir dans le transport en commun. C'est l'argent suffisant pour mettre en œuvre notre programme d'assurance médicament universel. Donc, quand M. Trudeau ne règle pas ces problèmes, c'est un coût. Et c'est un coût qui fait mal aux gens. C'est un coût qui blesse les gens parce que c'est des ressources, des finances, des revenus manqués. Et à cause de ça, c'est des ressources qu'on ne peut pas utiliser pour améliorer la vie des gens. Donc, notre approche, c'est différent. On va faire face à ces échappatoires et s'assurer que les autres riches paient le juste part. En investissant l'argent dans notre service public, on peut augmenter la capacité d'appliquer la loi et on peut s'assurer qu'on peut garder cet argent et l'investir dans votre vie, dans vos familles, pour aider les gens, pour faire face aux problèmes auxquels on a besoin d'agir. Donc, ça, c'est notre plan. So I want to let you know today we're here with incredible candidates, like I mentioned, Nadia from Sudbury and Andrienne from Nickel Belt. And we are so proud to have them as our candidates. And we're here to talk about the price, the cost of voting for Mr. Trudeau. Behind me, see a ticker. The Parliamentary Budget Office did an analysis and found that because of the loopholes and offshore tax havens and the lack of enforcement, that we are losing $25 billion a year in unrecovered revenue. That's the Parliamentary Budget Office. So $25 billion a year over 6 years is nearly $150 billion of revenue that we're losing. That's revenue that can be used to build hospitals, that can be used to hire millions of nurses, that can be used to invest in public transit, it can be used to invest in the future for our kids, for families, to help people out. And so there's a cost that Mr. Trudeau has chosen not to do anything about this. Over the past 6 years, this continues to go up. The money that we're losing in 1 minute is about $50,000. $50,000 we're losing because Mr. Trudeau has not taken the steps to close those offshore tax haven loopholes that allow for billions of dollars of revenue to be lost. That's $25 billion a year, $150 billion over the 6 years that he's been in power. We're going to end that. We're going to make sure that the super wealthy pay their fair share. Why is it that a worker puts in time and pays their fair share, but if you're a multi-million-dollar corporation that uses offshore tax havens and loopholes, you're not paying your fair share? And we've got clear evidence. If we invested resources into the public service, and they're saying roughly $100 million, we could recover as much as $14 billion a year. That would be a significant revenue to help us pay for the things that would help people out. So I want to remind folks, there's a cost to voting for Mr. Trudeau. The cost is this keeps on going up. This ticker keeps on going up. If you vote for New Democrats, we will put an end to these offshore tax havens, these loopholes, and make sure that we are recovering this investment, this revenue, and we're investing it back into people. That's what you get when you vote for Nadia. That's what you get when you vote for Andrienne. That's what you get when you vote for New Democrats. We're fighting for you. We're going to make sure that you are put first. Merci beaucoup. Thank you so much. And with that, I'm ready for any questions you might have. Je suis prêt pour vos questions.
First question is David Thurton from CBC News.
Sorry, jumping the gun there.
All good. I like how you busted out the vest. It's very cozy.
Yes, it's very cozy. And, it's very interesting and a fancy campaign office.
It is probably one of the fanciest I've ever been in. I like it.
Yes. Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Good to see you, Mr. Singh. I just want to ask you this. How are you going to influence a conservative government to accomplish some of the things that matter to your party?
I'm going to let you know what I'm fighting for. And the goal for New Democrats is to achieve these results. That's what we're about. We're fighting to make sure we put an end to these loopholes. We're fighting to make sure we've got a pharmacare that works, so Canadians don't have to worry about the cost of the medication. We're fighting to make sure we tackle the housing crisis, so families don't have to worry about how they're going to find a place to call home. These are the things we're fighting for, and we're going to fight for that no matter what happens in the election. People can know that we will fight for the things that you need, and whatever the makeup of Parliament is, I want to be your Prime Minister. Whatever people choose, I will fight for the things that matter to people.
Do you think it's easier to influence Erin O'Toole than Justin Trudeau?
I think that both Mr. Trudeau and Mr. O'Toole will be bad for Canadians. And they'll be bad in different ways, but they'll certainly be bad and they'll cost you. At the end of the day, the cost to Canadians is there. And I want to point this out. This wasn't a Conservative government behind me. This was Mr. Trudeau in power. That's nearly $150 billion of revenue lost simply because there's not proper enforcement, simply because there was not laws that ended offshore tax havens. This was the Parliamentary Budget Office, an independent office that found that this is what we're losing. That's Mr. Trudeau's decision to do. So there's a cost voting for Mr. Trudeau. I want folks to know that. But if you vote for New Democrats, we will fight this. We will tackle this. We are the only party that's made it really clear. We're going to put an end to the free ride that the billionaires have had. You can count on us to do that.
Next question, Robin Gill, Global News.
Mr. Singh, let's talk about your swing through Northern Ontario. Is it fair to say that it's open season for your party right now and you have a very strong chance in these ridings, or do you think that the Liberals could take them?
We think we've got incredible candidates. We're really confident that people are going to vote for Andrienne and Nadia. But we also know that the people of the North have been, in this community particularly, we know that people have been let down by their Liberals. We know that in this community that Laurentian University, a very vital university to the people of the North, to the people of Sudbury, was allowed to go bankrupt and was allowed to lose a lot of programs. And that had a devastating blow on so many people, on young people, on Indigenous communities, on Francophones. And the only ones fighting for you to say that we needed to actually save this university were New Democrats. Our provincial team, France-Gélinas, Jamie West, locally, Andrew Horwath as our leader here in Ontario. We were the ones, and ourselves, Charlie Angus, Carol Hughes, New Democrats were the ones fighting for this university when the Liberals did nothing. And we said early on in April that when we started seeing what was happening, we said, you got to save this university. And that fell on inaction from the Liberals. They did not respond, did not save this university. So we know in the North that people have seen who's been fighting for them. The people in Sudbury and Nicolbalt have seen who's been fighting for them, and it's New Democrats.
En français, s'il te plaît.
Dans ce comté, on a vu une grande tragédie de ce qui s'est passé dans l'université Laurentienne, et on a dit clairement qu'on doit le sauver. Et les députés libéraux dans ce comté, dans Nicolbalt et dans Sudbury, ils n'ont rien fait pour sauver l'université. Ils ont laissé la perte des programmes. Ils ont laissé qu'une institution publique comme une université a fait faillite. C'est complètement inacceptable. On aurait dû sauver cette institution et c'est exactement ce que notre équipe des néo-démocrates ont fait. On était les gens qui ont s'est battus pour défendre cette université. Notre équipe provinciale, Jamie West, France-Gélinas et notre équipe fédérale, Charlie Angus, Carol Hughes, et moi aussi, et notre chef provincial, on était là pour vous. C'était nous qui ont défendu le Nord, Sudbury et Nickel Belt. Donc, j'ai beaucoup de confiance que les gens au nord de l'Ontario ont vu le bénéfice, les avantages d'avoir des néo-démocrates parce qu'on se bat pour vous. On va continuer de le faire. Et on va sauver l'Université Laurentienne et on va toujours appuyer le travail de l'Université Sudbury pour une université, une institution pour et par les francophones. C'est aussi quelque chose qu'on appuie profondément.
Prochaine question, Jean-Sébastien Cloutier de Radio-Canada.
Bonjour, M. Singh.
Bonjour.
Certains pensent qu'il y a plusieurs de vos promesses qui sont très difficiles à réaliser. Ce matin, par exemple, vous n'êtes pas le premier au Canada à promettre d'aller chercher des milliards de dollars dans la lutte pour l'évasion fiscale. Chaque campagne électorale, des partis promettent ça, puis on voit que c'est difficile. Qu'est-ce qui nous dit que vous pourriez réussir là où d'autres ont échoué?
On a une preuve qui montre la différence entre nous et les autres partis. Pour nous, c'est une valeur et c'est une volonté. Mais pour les autres partis, je doute qu'ils ont le valeur ou la volonté de faire quelque chose. Et on a la preuve. On a présenté une motion néo-démocrate, dans laquelle on a dit qu'on doit faire face aux échappatoires, aux paradis fiscaux. On doit s'assurer que les milliardaires payent leur juste part. Et c'est une question de justice. Leur juste part, ça veut dire qu'ils ne payent pas à ce moment ce qu'ils doivent payer. Donc, on demande qu'ils payent leur juste part. Et cette motion était votée contre par les libéraux et les conservateurs qui ont travaillé ensemble pour rejeter cette idée. Donc, ce n'est pas vraiment une question hypothétique. On sait que les conservateurs et les libéraux sont contre l'idée de faire payer le juste part des ultra-riches. Ils sont contre cette importance de régler les paradis fiscaux et les échappatoires. Ils ont voté non. Pour nous, ce n'est pas une question. Pour nous, on va toujours travailler fort pour s'assurer que les ultra-riches payent le juste part. Et on a montré un autre exemple. Après les Panama Papers, on a des preuves qui montrent l'évasion fiscale illégale. Et depuis les 6 ans que M. Trudeau était au pouvoir, il n'a rien fait. Il n'y a aucune poursuite contre les gens, malgré le fait qu'on a des preuves qui montrent qu'ils ont effectivement fait quelque chose d'illégal. Donc, on a 6 ans de preuves et on a notre volonté et on a la motion qui montre qu'on est le seul parti qui veut vraiment faire face à ces échappatoires.
Par ailleurs, comment vous percevez une certaine montée en popularité de Maxime Bernier dans les sondages, entre autres?
Honnêtement, je ne peux pas comprendre parce que son sorte de politique ne rassemble pas aux valeurs néo-démocrates, le travail ensemble, le bien-être, le bien collectivité. Donc, je ne comprends pas pourquoi. Mais je peux dire, en général, il y a des gens qui sont frustrés au-delà de cette partie. Je comprends, en général, il y a des gens qui sont frustrés, les gens qui sont cyniques, les gens qui ont vu des belles paroles de M. Trudeau et après 600, ils ont vu des promesses brisées et le fait que les promesses brisées ont eu un impact négatif dans leur vie et ils ont coûté trop cher. Donc, je comprends cette frustration. Donc, je veux dire aux ces gens, vous pouvez croire en nous parce qu'on a toujours montré comment nos valeurs, nos volontés de travailler pour vous étaient toujours là. Donc, je veux donner d'espoir aux gens qu'on peut bâtir une meilleure société. On peut faire des choix différents, mais ça veut dire qu'on doit voter aussi. Donc, j'encourage tout le monde de voter. Votez NPD, on est là pour vous. On va changer les choses et améliorer la qualité de vie des gens.
Next question, Annie Berger. Oh, sorry, in English.
Yeah. I don't. I mean, to be honest with you, I don't understand why Mr. Bernier is getting some attention and people are moving towards that. His views and perspectives and policies aren't ones that connect with what we've been standing for and what we've been fighting for. So I don't get why people are going towards that. So putting that aside, I do understand though in general why there are people that are feeling really frustrated. People are feeling cynical. A lot of folks that I've met were really hopeful, and they voted for Justin Trudeau. They told me that. They voted for him in 2015. They tried again in 2019. And they said it's just cost them too much. Like, it cost a family was hoping to see pharmacare for all. The fact that it would have saved them thousands of dollars, and that promise being broken has cost people. It's hurt people. A lot of people were telling me that they were hoping to see something to make housing more affordable. And the fact that Mr. Trudeau promised to do something and their lives haven't gotten any better. In fact, costs have gone up. It's become more expensive. It's cost people. And so they're telling me, you know what? We're frustrated and we're upset. We were really hopeful, but we feel let down. And I want them to know, I want you to know, we are here for you. We're going to fight for you. And we've shown that throughout the pandemic, and we'll show that continuing forward. You can count on us to deliver on what people need and to fight for you and to lift you up.
Next question, Annie Bergeron-Oliver, CTV News.
Hi, Mr. Singh. Your party has worked hard to ensure that a large number of its candidates come from different diverse backgrounds. My math is right. That includes about 130 candidates who either identify as Indigenous or people of color. I'm wondering, if you do win on September 20th, will you ensure that that same kind of representation exists within the Prime Minister's office, even ministerial staff and high-up positions like Chief of Staff, for example?
Yeah, I would be honored to do that. As a leader, it's something that's been really important to me. And if I can take this as a great opportunity, I can shout out. We've had an incredible run and lots of excitement around the campaign. One, because we fight for people, and we've made people the heart of what we're doing. People are always the center of what we're doing. But I also have to say, if you look at the people calling the shots, a lot of my incredible team, these are incredible women. I've got a Chief of Staff, Jennifer Howard, and Campaign Director, who is phenomenal, a powerhouse. My National Director, Anne McGrath, is a legend and has shown incredible strength and has done so much in our movement. So we have walked the walk. On my team right now, on my bus, the matriarchs that run the show are Laura Jemba right here and Marie Delamattia. So our team is made up of incredible women, and we have a great team of young and folks with more experience. We've got a team that's diverse, and we're really proud of that. And that's why we're doing so well. That's why we're able to fight for people, because we're made up of the people that we want to represent.
Great. And today, the National Council of Canadian Muslims is calling on Trudeau and O'Toole specifically to commit to intervening in Bill 21, saying that not doing so is offensive as the bill creates a second class of citizens. I'm wondering what you say to people who believe that all of the federal leaders should come out stronger against this bill and intervene.
So I've always been opposed to the bill. I've been opposed to discriminatory laws, laws that divide, laws that create two classes of people. I think that's absolutely wrong. And I think about what it means to a young woman who wears a hijab, who wants to be a teacher. I think it's absolutely wrong. And it's being fought right now in Quebec by Quebecers. They are fighting it, and it is in the courts. And there was a significant victory in the first legal battle, and those battles will continue. I think it's also a mark of honor that it's people in Quebec that are fighting this bill, and they're saying it's wrong. And I think that's exactly the way it should happen, and it's being fought right now.
En français, s'il te plaît.
Je pense que ces sortes de lois qui divisent sont mauvais. Et j'étais toujours contre des lois divisives, et je suis contre les lois qui créent des divisions qui sont discriminatoires. Et c'était toujours ma position. Mais ce qui se passe maintenant, c'est encourageant, parce que c'est les Québécois, Québécoises qui se battent contre ce projet de loi. Et c'est exactement ce qu'il faut faire, ce qu'on veut voir. On veut voir les gens dans leur communauté qui se battent contre une loi qui discrimine dans leur communauté. Donc, on a une poursuite, ça continue. C'est important que ça continue. Et il y avait déjà une victoire. Et les Québécois, Québécoises vont continuer cette bataille.
Next question, Menaka Raman-Wilms from the Globe and Mail.
Hello, Mr. Singh.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I asked you about the excerpt from Jody Wilson-Raybould's book that was published in the Globe and Mail on Saturday. So I want to go back to that. Yesterday, you said the revelations in the excerpt are shocking but not surprising, and you said it also shows a troubling trend from Mr. Trudeau. So can you explain a little bit more about what you meant by that troubling trend, and also how would you do things differently?
Well, the trend that we've seen is Mr. Trudeau has really held himself out to be a feminist, really dug deep and put that out there again and again. And then we're seeing actions that are to the contrary, sadly. And this, I I don't like doing this because I want to see the results, and I don't like making it about a person. But the reality is, he said that this is important to him, but then we see a pattern behavior. You know, allegations against allegations of sexual harassment not being followed up on, no investigations happening, despite having heard or known of allegations of sexual harassment being raised months and months before, when it comes to his party specifically. And then when it comes to women in the Canadian Forces, I think this is one of the worst examples, because it is no surprise. There was a report in 2015 done by a Supreme Court Justice, Justice Deschamps, that clearly laid out that what's going on in the Canadian Forces is a culture that is dangerous to women, and that one of the key recommendations to fix this problem, it was to put in place an independent process so that women who are facing sexual harassment can go there to this independent process. That was a requirement, that was the recommendation in 2015. Mr. Trudeau became Prime Minister in 2015, and in 6 years, literally did nothing to bring in that process. And now, with the recent revelations that the allegations or serious complaints were made that were raised to the highest office of this land. They went to the office of the Prime Minister, right to the Defense Minister, and nothing was done. Really just is heartbreaking, because it sends a message to women that they're going to be ignored. And then, to make it even worse, instead of putting in place the recommendation from 2015, Mr. Trudeau's solution was, I'm going to do another report and hire another Supreme Court Justice to do a report. And really, that was a bit of a slap in the face, because what is the point of doing a report when you haven't even put in place the first recommendation, the primary recommendation of a report that was 6 years old? And so, yeah, it's this ongoing kind of saying one thing and doing another. And Ms. Jody Wilson-Raybould's powerful story really exposes another side of that.
Does it surprise you to hear about the casual racism that she experienced within the cabinet, and this idea of white cabinet ministers telling her, as an Indigenous person, what to do for Indigenous people?
I mean, it's pretty shocking. We don't expect that would happen. For folks who know Ms. Jody Wilson-Raybould and folks who don't, she is an incredibly accomplished lawyer, someone with an incredible resume of experience. She's someone that one would expect to listen to whatever position she was in, who's got a lot of insight and a lot to offer. And her experiences are frankly the experiences of a lot of women and a lot of Indigenous people, a lot of racialized people in lots of different sectors. Women are often ignored despite their expertise and their capacity and their ability. Often racialized people are told that they don't know, are not qualified. That happens all too often. So her experience, sadly, is a reality for a lot of people, and she's spoken and shared that. And I think what I hope is that it will make a lot of people feel less alone and feel like their stories are being reflected, because it happens to a lot of people. And I'm hoping once we can, as always, bring more attention to these problems, we can fix them.
Next question, Karina Roman, CBC News.
Hello, Mr. Singh.
Yeah.
Let's just go back to your costing yesterday of your platform.
Sure.
You've conceded as well that it's quite highly dependent, the things you want to do, on creating new streams of revenue. But as the pandemic has shown us, anything can happen that can throw that off kilter. So considering that it's not a for sure that you would be able to get all that revenue depending on any kind of economic shock that comes or another pandemic, what priorities would get the go-ahead if you weren't able to raise that kind of revenue, and what priorities would you be willing to drop lower on the list that might have to be held off on out of all your promises if you can't get the revenue that you're looking to get to accomplish all that?
Okay. Well, I would say, so one of the fundamental things that we want to do so that we can actually bring in these social programs is to make sure we're making the super rich pay their fair share. So that's one of our top priorities. That's really a signature of what we're offering as New Democrats, is that when everyday folks feel like pretty frustrated with this rigged economy, that they're going in, punching out their clocks, they're paying their money, or they're earning their salaries, and then they're paying their taxes. They feel really frustrated that billionaires get away with a free ride. So that's a top priority for us. We'll absolutely do that. And then in terms of what we've gone through, we know that healthcare has been exposed as a serious problem, and we want to invest in healthcare. So for New Democrats, that's a top priority, making sure we invest in our healthcare system. And some of the things that we know are key is long-term care, what we saw in this pandemic and how seniors were the ones who bore the brunt of the pandemic with their lives. We can never allow that to happen again. So our commitment to improving the quality of care for seniors, and that means getting rid of for-profit care, is a top priority. In healthcare, making sure we invest in that. And we know that people want good jobs. People want good jobs that are going to be there in the long term, and we want to fight the climate crisis. So we're going to invest in creating those good jobs that help us fight the climate crisis. Those are some, two of the really top things I think about. And then finally, housing. Probably the biggest concern that I hear from people across the country is the fact that housing is just unaffordable. They cannot find a place to call home. That's something that's impacting Indigenous communities. It's impacting larger cities. It's impacting rural communities. It's really across the country. So I would say those are the three top priorities that we have, and we work hard to make sure we deliver on those.
I'll just point out that you didn't say what you wouldn't do, because that was pretty much all your priorities. But moving on to next question is there anything in the Conservative platform that you could support if there was a minority Conservative government, for example?
Well, I'm struggling with that one, right? For good reason. The Conservatives have a different approach. Their approach to what's going on and the struggles that people are going through is different, and it's one that's going to cut the help that people need. I don't agree with that approach, fundamentally. I don't believe in cutting the help that people need. They want to take an approach which is going to make life harder. And so I don't adopt that position, and I am opposed to it, in fact. But I also want to point out that Mr. Trudeau has taken a lot of positions that I'm very vehemently opposed to. He has voted against pharmacare, and I think that's a wrong position to take. He voted against getting rid of profit out of long-term care homes. I'm firmly against that as well. He's taken a position that he's against making the billionaires pay their fair share. I am firmly against that. In fact, we put the motion for it. So we don't agree on the fundamentals there, and that's why more New Democrats in office, more New Democrats electing Nadia and Antigan will make sure we've got more voices that are going to fight for the things that people need. And that's what I can say to folks, that we don't agree with the Conservative approach. We don't agree with Mr. Trudeau's past 6 years. That's why we're putting out an option. You don't have to be relegated to those two choices. There is another option, and to get this option, you got to vote for it. So make sure you get out and vote.
Next question, Althea Raj with the Toronto Star.
Hi, we tried to get this answer from your team yesterday, but we didn't get it, so I'm hoping you can give me a clear answer. Your platform, the items in your platform, I should say, were costed by the Parliamentary Budget Officer. When did the Parliamentary Budget Officer deliver the last costing?
I'll have my team follow up with you on the exact time and date. That's a detail that my team would know. But I can tell you that as soon as we got the answers back, we then put forward our costing. We wanted to work with the Parliamentary Budget Office, and we wanted to cost out our initiatives as we'd always promised. We wanted to tax the super rich, and we wanted to have their costing in terms of how much revenue we could raise from doing that. It was significant, and we shared the results of that costing as soon as we were provided it.
So I just want to be clear that what you're saying is the Parliamentary Budget Officer did not deliver the last item that was costed until after the last election debate. So that costing was delivered to the NDP like Friday, September 10th, and not before. And then I'm going to tack in my supplemental, because you said something I thought was really interesting, and I'd like you to reflect on it. You're running to become Prime Minister, and you just said that you didn't understand why people were being attracted to the message from the People's Party of Canada. And I find that a little bit surprising, especially coming from you. You must have some ideas why people are gravitating towards that party. So I'd like you to reflect on that, and perhaps the polarization that it is creating.
So in terms of the details of the costing, my team will follow up with you, but we delivered that to folks as soon as we had them. And then in terms of the PPC, I don't get it because I don't think that way. Like I don't get it because I want us to, I believe in taking care of one another. I believe in caring about one another. I believe that the more we look after each other, the better we all are. And I'm only here today standing in front of you because lots of people helped me out and looked out for me and supported me, and maybe in a lot of cases strangers helped me out that didn't realize I was going through a tough time. So for me, it's really hard to imagine someone who doesn't want to do their part to fight the pandemic, that doesn't want to follow public health guidelines. Like, those things are hard for me to understand because I don't get that. Like, I want to do whatever I can to help people out. I love working together. I like when people care for each other. So that's where I come from. People being frustrated and being angry, I get that. I absolutely get why people are angry and frustrated. I don't get why they go towards like the PPC type of way of thinking, but people that are frustrated and angry, I absolutely get that. There's people that are angry because their system is rigged, and they work so hard and they're doing everything right, but they can't get ahead. They keep on doing all the right things, but they can't find a place they can afford, and they can't get a job that's got the right benefits to make sure their family's taken care of. They can't earn enough to put food on the table, and it's frustrating, and they're like, what am I doing wrong? You're not doing anything wrong. It's not your fault. It's clearly a rigged economy, which has meant it's harder and harder for working people. It's harder and harder for the middle class. But if you're a billionaire, if you're a wealthy CEO, if you're a rich corporation, you get all sorts of loopholes and benefits. That rigged economy is frustrating, and people are angry because of it. And I want to give them some hope. I want you to know you're not doing anything wrong. You are trying your best, but the system has been set up to not let you do your best. I want to change that system, and you can count on me and my team to change that.
Next question, Warren Schlette from CBC Sudbury.
Good morning. A lot of this, the main thrust of this campaign stop is all about corporates and changing some of the ways that corporations are run. And AFN National Chief Roseanne Archibald was recently talking about how one of the big barriers to getting any meaningful action on reconciliation is because that corporate mentality is deeply baked into the very structure of the federal government itself, and that's something that a lot of people would tend to view. Why should First Nation voters in Northern Ontario specifically believe that an NDP government would be able to change that?
Because we want to change it. I don't think that other parties have wanted to change it. They've kind of liked keeping things as it is. We are not happy with the way things are. We think that the ticker behind me for 6 years, that we've let billionaires and multinational corporations and rich corporations in Canada hide their wealth that they make here in Canada off the backs of Canadians. We think that's wrong. We don't want that to continue. We don't want to let billionaires continue to have a free ride, which has been kind of the way things are. We don't accept that. We don't accept that people are having a harder and harder time to find a home they can afford. We don't accept that it's harder and harder to get access to healthcare. We don't think that's the way things should be. So when it comes to Indigenous people, we want you to know we do not accept the excuses that Mr. Trudeau has said, oh, it's too hard to get clean drinking water. I don't buy that. If there was a clean drinking water problem in any major city in Canada, it would be solved right away. I don't buy the excuses. I don't believe that other parties have wanted to make this a priority. I want you to know New Democrats care deeply. We are going to fight with everything we have to fix the problems that are there. We believe the first people of this land deserve justice and respect and dignity. And we would start by stopping the legal fight against kids in court. We would ensure that Indigenous kids have equal funding. We would make sure we follow the Human Rights Tribunal rulings. We'd make sure we deliver clean drinking water. And those are just the starting points of real justice and real reconciliation.
You've been spending far more time here in Sudbury than any of the other major federal party leaders. What sort of an influence do you expect that you can personally have on the local race, and is that why you're spending so much time here?
We're spending time here because we're going to win this riding. We're going to win with... We're going to have two new incredible members of parliament that are going to represent Sudbury and Nickel Belt. France and Jamie are feeling a bit lonely. They want to have some friends that are actually going to fight for Northerners, that are actually going to stand up for the people of Sudbury and Nickel Belt. They're going to actually stand up and fight for the things that people need here. So we want folks to know that we care about you, we're here for you, and being here is just a little bit that I can do to make sure you know that this community matters, this riding matters, the North matters, and these are some incredible candidates that I stand behind. They're standing behind me right now, but I wish I was standing behind them. But they're incredible, and I want you to know you can count on them to fight for you.
Next question, in Campo with CTV Northern Ontario.
Hello, Mr. Singh. I want to ask a follow-up to Warren and Robin's question about the NDP making inroads in Northern Ontario. Sudbury has a long history of voting Liberal, but the last couple of times it has voted NDP and sent an NDP member to Ottawa. I'm wondering, from some of the reaction we're getting from voters, how do you counter the argument from some of the voters here that, okay, I'm going to send a Liberal because at least we have a seat at the table, and we've had a seat at the table since 2015?
Well, I'd say to folks, what has that seat at the table gotten you? One of the biggest crises that has hit Sudbury and Nickel Belt was losing Laurentian University and all those programs, and the impact on young people and Indigenous people, on the staff, on the team, and on the future for kids. Where were your Liberal members of Parliament? What did that seat at the table do? When we sent letters in April to say, do something to save this university, did they do anything? And I would say to folks, it doesn't matter if you've got a party that doesn't care to fight for you, that doesn't care to stand up for you, that doesn't care to demand the things that your community needs. I think people are better off when you've got a strong and passionate voice that's going to fight for you, that's going to stand up for you and raise the concerns. You will get more out of it. And in this pandemic, we can say, you know, the Liberals were in power, but they wanted to do the minimum. And that would have hurt the people of Sudbury. That would have hurt the people of Nickel Belt. We saw that they wanted to do the minimum when it came to the wage subsidy. They wanted a 10% wage subsidy, which would not have saved jobs. We fought to increase that to 75%. They wanted a $1,000 CERB. $1,000 wouldn't have covered rent for people. And we fought to make sure that it was doubled so that there was $2,000 of support. When it came down to it, people were better off by having New Democrats there for them. And I want you to know that you will be better off having someone who's going to fight for you rather than someone that just sits back and lets things happen and doesn't actually raise their voice.
And as a follow-up, I'm just wondering, in terms of that fighting or that voice, what sort of voice would Sudbury have if a Conservative government were to come to power and we were to send an NDP member of Parliament to Ottawa?
I would say to people, for everything that I've heard from people that they care about, whether it's a housing crisis, concerns about long-term care, investing in our healthcare system to include medication coverage, for all the things that people need, whether it's childcare or fighting the climate crisis by creating good jobs. The more New Democrats you elect, the more we will get these things. That's the message I want folks to know. The best way, the guaranteed way to get the things you want, instead of hoping the Liberals will do it, we've seen they haven't. And if you're worried about the Conservatives, vote more New Democrats in, and we will fight for you and we will deliver for you. That is the best way to get the things that people need.
Next question, Mackenzie Gray with CTV News.
Good morning, Mr. Singh. Yesterday at your announcement, you said that one of the goals of your housing plan is to flatten house prices, that you don't want them to go up. To solve the housing crisis that you say is going on in Canada, how long do house prices have to stay flat in this country?
Well, we look at what's gone wrong to kind of map out what would be better. What's gone wrong is since 2015, since Mr. Trudeau took office, housing prices nationally have gone up by about $300,000 on average. And that fluctuates from region to region, but we've seen a significant increase in the cost of housing, the cost of rent over the past 6 years. So that astronomical increase is just hurting people. It's not keeping up with salaries. It's not keeping up with people's capacity to buy homes. And so we want to stop that astronomical raise. And we want to really just make sure that housing is tied to affordability. It's tied to what people can actually afford, what's actually in people's budgets. So that's going to be our metric. We're going to make sure that people can actually afford to find a place they can rent, afford to find a place they can call home, afford to be able to buy a home. That's what we're going to make sure that we look at when we're working towards solving this problem.
65% or roughly or so Canadians own their own homes. So I just challenge you on that. I think there's a lot of people who are really excited that their house prices have gone up a lot. And for millennials who bought houses in the last few years, what do you say to them who've stretched themselves to buy a house and they're now hearing from you that they don't want to see an increase, or you don't want to see an increase in the value of their largest asset, when their parents and other people who've got into the housing market before have seen their wealth go up a substantial amount?
We just look at the system we're in. And right now, it's not benefiting everyday folks. Families that have a home, and I've spoken to lots of people who have a house, saying, yeah, we've got a house, but if our kids can never afford to buy one of their own, what's the point of that? If my house keeps on going up in value, the house that I want to move to also went up in value. So how does that benefit me unless I'm trying to cash out? For people that want to live in their communities, and most people do, they don't want to just pick up and leave. Most people want to stay in their own communities. If they want to buy another house, that house has also gone up. And it's going up astronomically. We have seen in Canada the affordability or the lack thereof is amongst the worst of all OECD countries in terms of how much the value or the cost of our housing is going up. It's higher than every other country in the OECD. So things are clearly not going in the right direction. It's becoming more and more unaffordable. It is an untenable system. It is a trend that is not going to mean that the next generation is ever going to be able to own a home. And that, to a lot of people, is a problem, and that's what we want to fix.
Next question will go to Ian Bickes from the Canadian Press.
Sorry, I was on mute. Thanks for squeezing me in here. Back to the corporate loophole and raising taxes on billionaires.
Yes.
Trudeau said this morning that there's limits to how much you can effectively tax the successful and wealthy, and that disincentivize work and such. I guess, what do you say to that there is a limit to how much you can go on this front?
So the idea that Mr. Trudeau's vision is limited, I'm not surprised by that. That's what we've been up against for the past 6 years. He doesn't want to do anything about this, and I'm not surprised that he said that, oh, limit your hopes and aspirations around making sure the billionaires pay their fair share. I've long been saying he's been defending the super rich. He's on the side of the billionaires, and that's just more evidence of it. I don't buy it. Not too long ago, we had a society where the wealthiest paid more of their fair share. It wasn't that long ago that they did. And there's been decisions made. Conservatives and liberals have been eroding that contribution to the point that people are now shouldering more of the burden than the wealthy. That wasn't always the case. It wasn't always the way things were. We don't accept that we have to keep going down this path where the burden falls more and more on you and your families. Why should it? What should happen is the billionaires, the wealthy corporations, the Amazons of this world should be paying their fair share. We believe in that. And we're not afraid of the fact that it might be hard to do. We believe that it's the right thing to do, and we're going to make it happen.
And it's proven very difficult and complex to actually crack down on this. Trudeau has increased budgets for the CRA to recoup some taxes, and there's been some high-profile court cases lost on getting back some corporate tax loopholes. What are you actually going to do differently? And then also, in terms of with your budget, how much of the implications of if you can't raise this revenue, what does that do for your budget going forward?
I really appreciate the question in terms of the court cases. Canada fought a court case against a Canadian corporation that made all of its revenue in Canada off of Canadians, took that revenue to a bank in the Caribbean. All the revenue was made in Canada. All that revenue went to a bank into the Caribbean for the purpose of hiding it. The judge ruled that all those things were accurate, but found that it was completely legal to do. Mr. Trudeau allowed those laws to continue to be this way. So they fought this court case, but found that the laws allowed a corporation to basically hide their money in this way. It was completely legal. We would change those laws. We would not allow that to continue. There are clear things that we can do. And it really has come down to the fact that Mr. Trudeau has not done them, has chosen not to. We've known about the Panama Papers, and they outline clear examples of tax evasion which are illegal. In the past 6 years, there's not been a single case, a prosecution of any of this tax evasion. Why is that? I believe very strongly that Mr. Trudeau has no intention of closing these loopholes. He voted against it, so actually it's not really a guess. He made it clear. We believe that it can be achieved. We know that other countries are starting to do it, and we know that we've done it in the past. It had been the way things were in the past, where the wealthiest did contribute more of their fair share. We want to return to that. And it's going to be tough. I'm not suggesting it's going to be easy, but it is absolutely doable. It just means having the will to do it. It means changing the laws. It means increasing investments. And one of the things that we're calling for is we're going to increase investments in our public service, specifically related to going after these corporate tax evaders, by $100 million. And we're going to recover $14 billion. And we're committed to doing that. We know it's achievable, and we'll make it happen.
This concludes our press conference. Thank you. Merci.
Cheers.